Welcome back. We're about ready to install OpenVPN, and in the earlier video, we did a lot of setup. We made some decisions and did some preconditions and got some things ready. So we're all now. I asked you in the last video to have this information available, and I trust you've got it. And so we're ready to come down here and actually start the installation. So I'm over on PF1. This is again my Windows 10 box. And on PF1. And so where we go is just to I'm on the landing page. I go to VPN and I go to OpenVPN. You can have multiple OpenVPN servers running on any single instance of pfSense. They would just need to each have their own port. Okay, so where we're headed to initially is we're headed to the Wizard. So let's go through this together and talk about the choices that we're going to make, or many of the choices we're going to make. So we've run the Wizard here, OpenVPN Remote Access Server Setup, select an authentication backend type. We have these three here listed. Radius is an industry standard. If we wanted to do multi-factor authentication with Duo, I would approach that using Radius, and I would, Windows servers can function as Radius. They do a pretty good job, and like with our remote desktop gateway, we use Radius and OpenVPN as a third-party multi-factor authentication. LDAP would be a plugin to Active Directory where we would use Active Directory to validate username and password. We're going to use local user database. Now, local user database is it's a great choice for a handful of people, for like an IT team. I don't think of what we're doing here as being for the masses, for like all of your end user kind of thing. I don't see this as that. I see OpenVPN from my perspective as being a service tool for IT professionals, or for work from home or remote to home for small numbers of users. If I was to want to support a large number of users, I would look at something like Microsoft's Remote Desktop Gateway. So what we do then here is we make our initial choice and we continue on. So the next choice it's asking us to is it wants us to choose a certificate authority. It recognizes that I already have a certificate authority installed, but this one is a internet recognizable, and you can see here from, oh, that's a fake one, but this one's from Let's Encrypt. This is my test certificate, and then this is my valid certificate from Let's Encrypt. What I want to do is I want to create a new one. So now what this is it's a certificate authority. Think, well, what is a certificate authority? It's the engine or the mechanism or the parent that then creates the actual user certificates, computer certificates. So it's the source of creating certificates, and we're going to create one. Now it's going to be a self-signed, and as we talked in the earlier video, that's intentional. We want it to be self-signed. Why? Well, because it makes it unique. It's like only speaking a specific language that no one else knows. It's a security step for us to do a self-signed certificate and then build our VPN access around a certificate that isn't known to the internet. Okay, so I'm going to do here OpenVPN CA. There is a cause in some cases to go to a stronger key length. 2048, there's a note here about 2048 is kind of a minimum. And there are other choices here. Whenever you bump up in the number of bits that are used to encrypt the data, it does add overhead. So you want this to be secure enough, but not overly so in that it'll slow down, it'll slow things down. I'm happy with 2048. I believe it does a great job considering that we're using a self-signed certificate that is, you might say, private. Then I'm happy with that. And we are just, our goal here is to encrypt data in and out of this network. The lifetime for the certificate authority, you can see here, is shown as 10 years. Okay, it's just a default. And the chances are really good that you and I will rebuild this firewall within 10 years. What we're doing now is we're just creating or configuring the information that will be part of the certificates that this server generates. Okay, that's what we're doing here. All of this becomes part of the stamp that this certificate authority will put on certificates that it creates. And so I just filled in the boxes and I say add the new CA. Okay. So now we're to choose a server certificate. So we created a certificate authority, and it's now saying, okay, you can now, we need to assign a certificate to the OpenVPN server. And it does see that I have a wildcard cert here, but now this, as we mentioned before, this is a honored on the internet or third party or however you want to think about it. This is a valid on the internet certificate to anybody in the world, and I don't want to use that one. I want to stick with my private isolated self-signed certificates. And so I'm going to add a new certificate. Give it a name. I'm just going to say it's my OpenVPN server certificate. Same considerations we talked here. This is something that's fairly new in that it's recommending that we not allow the certificate to last longer than just over a year. And I was going to say this is new, and I just mentioned that. And what it says here is that some platforms, they may consider the certificate invalid if it goes more than a year. Now, this is a self-signed certificate, and so if there was ever a case where we might push it beyond a year, we could certainly do that. I think, well, what's going to happen a year from now or 398 days from now? We'd have to just generate a new certificate for the server. I guess I should finish that thought. There's a more than a movement. There's kind of a new standard on the internet that SSL certificates be roughly a year, that when they're issued, that when the certificates themselves are issued, that they're valid for roughly a year. And this one is a year plus what, a month or so to give you time to update it. So we'll stick with the defaults on that. And so really, what are we doing here? Well, we're referencing our server, our certificate, our CA, and we're going to create now a certificate off of it for our server. Okay, so you can see here we're already to step 9 of 11, and so we're working through this pretty quickly. The next question is, what interface are we going to ask this OpenVPN server to listen on? And it defaults to WAN, and that makes sense. Now, you may have named it something else, but what you're most likely interested in here is this is in our case, internet facing. You're going to listen on the internet, and well, which interface is that? That's the WAN interface. This is here where I was telling you that from my memory, things have changed here. So here you can see it's our protocol. What protocol are we going to use for clients to connect? And it defaults to UDP version 4, but also we could create a server on version 6, IPv6. We could also go TCP if we'd prefer. And then this one here on all interfaces are multi-homed, and that throws me off a little bit. I believe that if we wanted to do both in one wizard, we could just select this, but I'm going to keep it simple, and we're going to do UDP on IPv4 only. And as you recall, UDP is being that it's connectionless, we're going to be able to minimize the overhead of communicating in and out of the server. The default port for OpenVPN, and this is just OpenVPN, uses 1194. And in some of the write-ups, you'll see where people will suggest changing it. And absolutely, we understand that if you've got a hack attempt or an intrusion attempt that's targeted to OpenVPN, then the first place you're going to go look is port 1194. So you could obscure it by putting it on an alternate port. But then when you create your client will also reference then the alternate port. Not a big deal. I'm okay with 1194, so we'll leave it at that. And then ask it to give a name to this server. And I'm just going to name it based upon that fully qualified domain name. It doesn't have to be uppercase. It doesn't have to be uppercase. Okay. So then those are boxes that we make a choice, some of which was pre-filled for us and we just agree to. Now we get into the cryptographic settings, or how the data is encrypted for the server, and we're gonna accept the defaults here. Okay, notice it's giving us several. Okay, all right. I'll just mention this here, but I'm going to focus on just helping you to get kind of the building blocks of OpenVPN. That if the hardware that your pfSense is running on supports encryption, hardware-based encryption, you can enable it for pfSense. You can enable it in the settings area, and then you can use it. And I do. I do. It's called AESNI, I believe, is the designation, and and so I enable it, and then you can do hardware-based encryption. But often, I guess you'd say an approach to deploying technology is that you start simple. So we're starting with IPv4 only, no crypto, no hardware cryptography, and then you get it working, and then you come back and say, okay, I want to add IPv6 alongside of IPv4, or I want to introduce hardware encryption, and build it up from there. I think that's a good approach. Get it, especially if you're new, if you're just learning or first deploying a technology, is start simple, get it working, and then as you become more comfortable with it, then you can enhance it from there. So this is that network that we talked about, where when the VPN client connects, they're going to be actually connected to this network, and it needs to be a different network than any of your actual real networks. Well, real, it is going to be a real network, but it's not going to be our CorpNet. It's not going to be our DevNet. It's an isolated network that VPN users are connected to. Now, VPN didn't always used to be this way. It used to be, and some VPN I believe still does, where you just drop off the VPN client onto an existing network, like your LAN. This is much better in that it'll give us the ability to create firewall rules between our tunnel network and our LAN, in our case, our CorpNet or DevNet. Redirecting the gateway makes sense here. Force all client generated traffic through the tunnel. So when someone makes a VPN connection, do you want to have them with one connection into your corporate network and then another connection to the internet, or by checking this box, you're saying their traffic is all going to go across the VPN connection? The next box here is where we put in our network IDs that we wish the clients to be able to connect to. Okay, and so I've just got the network IDs here for my CorpNet and DevNet, and they're separated by a comma. Okay, and then I also have their CIDR notation. Okay, specify the maximum number of clients currently connected that can currently connect or allowed to concurrently connect. I often do 5. Uh, well, what am I thinking of? Well, I'm thinking of like if I connect and my connection gets broken, do I have to wait for it to time out before I can reconnect again, or reconnect using a different account, or how many people are going to be supporting this customer, and so on. So I don't know. 5 is probably the highest number I put in here. Sometimes I put in as few as 2, but okay, I'll stick with my 5 here. But anyways, you get what it's asking here. The number of clients allowed to connect to this server. How many are we going to allow to be connected at any given time? And as we work our way down, we're going to leave these alone, allow compression. Okay. So here's the box where we have to define our domain name and our DNS server. And so we'll go ahead and do that. And we could put multiple DNS servers in here. If we had a network time protocol server, if we wanted to enable NetBIOS, Win servers. Okay. All right. So that was it. Now, I think we went slow enough and touched bases on the places where you would make choices based upon a standard or a kind of a baseline installation. This page here, we're on 10 of 11 now. With this page here, Don, it says, if we take a moment and read it, what it's going to offer to do is, if we check these boxes, and I would encourage you to do it, it's going to create the firewall rules for us. Okay, so here's traffic from clients to the server. Add a rule to permit connections to this OpenVPN server. And then over here, add a rule to allow traffic from connected clients to pass inside the VPN tunnel. Okay. Now you can modify these records later, and you can add to them, you can adjust them. Okay, so we're done. Now, if we look here, we can go in and look. We can make some changes if we want to. Did we catch this when we were doing the installation? I don't know if we went past this too quickly, but what I'm asking for here, this is actually kind of important, and I'm glad that I took a minute just to jump in here, is I'm saying that for our particular server, we're going to ask that the clients have both a certificate, that's this here, SSL TLS, plus their username and password. And you can do just username and password, just certificate, or even a shared key. So I'm glad I had a chance to look at that. I believe that's a good approach. Okay, so you can come back in here and review. Okay. All right. If we wanted to go and look at and see if it's running, go over here, OpenVPN is running. If we go to the firewall and we look at our firewall rules, we see we now have a third interface, and it would be kind of something that you'd want to do to come and look at what the rules are. Okay, so I'd go at this. So this is now our VPN clients come in on what is considered a separate interface, and we have here a rule that was created for us. Can we check those boxes? And it's an allow all rule. It's an any allow all rule. And if you look at it, it is only IPv4, but it's any protocol, any source, any destination. So that's good to know. And then we had some variants on how we did our CorpNet, because we have these two networks here. Depending on how you did this, you may need to tweak it in order for your VPN clients to be able to communicate on these networks. And I've got my default rules here. Let's just take a quick look at them. So we're specifying the interface. This one is for IPv4, but here's where you might have something different. You possibly could have any here, possibly, but I have CorpNet here. And then for my DevNet one, I actually have a network ID. I have this. I have network, and then I have the network ID. Well, why are we looking at all this? We're looking at all this because when it comes to troubleshooting, all of our installations are going to be unique based upon how we create our rules, because each of us installed our servers independently and differently. There's one other thing that I'll show you here, and then we'll wrap up this video. You can now come here. I'm over on the dashboard, and you can add a widget for OpenVPN. I'll go ahead and do that. And what it'll do is it'll show us as clients connect where they connected from and what IP address they were given on that isolated network that we identified as our tunnel network. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we'll come back and we'll take a look at how to assign certificates to those two users that we're going to use for testing, and then how to run the client to generate the installation package that we'll send out to the users who are intending to be able to VPN into our pfSense box. And then after we do that, we'll test. Okay, all right, I'll wrap up this video and I'll see you in the next one.